One way or the other. Okay, so welcome to the American Ethical Union's Assembly Educational Programming. Tonight, very pleased that Joan Johnson Lewis is here to talk with us about polarity management. And this is part of a larger series of educational offerings that the American Ethical Union is putting out. We have a lay leadership training series, lay leadership skills training. And there's a whole bunch of modules that are either developed and ready to go or pretty close to being ready to go. And Will, you can talk more about that as you're interested. And we can show you a way to kind of find out more information there as well. But rather than take up all your time doing that now, I'm going to turn things over to Joan Johnson Lewis. And there you are.
Yeah, and I will tell you right at the beginning that this originally, in its fullness of a workshop to really develop some competence, was designed to be about a 4-hour workshop. So you're getting a little bit of a taste of it and hopefully get inspired to take a more deep dive into polarity management. So I want to start with a natural example of a polarity. Inhaling and exhaling. You do one at a time and the processes are interdependent. Can anybody inhale and exhale at the same time? I've never been able to figure out how to do it. So the way it works is you inhale in order to get oxygen into your system. Your body then converts oxygen into carbon dioxide. And if you keep inhaling and don't exhale, you're going to build up carbon dioxide in your system. And so the natural tendency is to move to exhaling in order to clean out that carbon dioxide. And if you just keep exhaling and exhaling, what happens? Well, you'll have too little oxygen in your system. And so then you need to inhale. And so this is a polarity in that it's two different things that are mutually interdependent, and yet they are in tension because you can't do both at once. For some of this meeting, what I'm going to ask is that if you want to, when I ask for contributions and answers, if somebody just unmutes and answers, that would work well. It'll help us move faster. What is the overall goal of both inhaling and exhaling? Anybody want to offer an idea?
To breathe.
Yeah, and why do you need to breathe?
To get oxygen distributed in the body.
And why do you need that?
To sustain life.
To sustain life, yeah, you want to stay alive. And what is the price you would pay if you can't figure out how to manage the two of them?
You become very sick.
You could become sick or even die. Yep. So the greater purpose here is to live, and the fear that your body is feeling when it moves from one to the other is actually death. What are some of the warning signs that you're focused too much on exhaling? You might try it and feel what happens in your body.
You become dizzy and lightheaded.
Pass out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what are some of the warning signs if you inhale for too long? I get a constriction across my middle. Yeah. So it's a natural pairing. So I want to look at a different polarity that's a little more complex, but it's also one we're familiar with, to just give you a sense of what polarities are and how they work. So a positive goal we might have is to live a healthy life, and we want to avoid an unhealthy life. And a healthy life has in it activity, and it has in it rest. When we're resting, we're not active, and when we're active, we're not resting. So what are some of the downsides when you're doing a lot of activity and not getting the rest that you need?
You get tired.
Okay, you get tired. What else?
Lack of focus.
Lack of focus.
Burnout.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some of the ones I thought of are here. Maybe your mind is overloaded, your body's exhausted, you're overwhelmed, maybe you're even burned out. So what do you do to promote a healthy life if you're experiencing those negatives? Well, you naturally move to go rest. And what are some of the benefits of having enough rest in your life?
Have an easier time concentrating and remembering things.
Yeah,
More energy.
more energy.
Feel refreshed.
Yeah.
Feel more positive.
Yeah. So the ones I thought of is, resting actually helps you integrate your thoughts. It helps rejuvenate your body. You relax and get refreshed. So let's say you rest and you rest and you rest, and 5 days later, what do you start to feel as the downsides of focusing just on resting?
You're tired. You continue
You
to
may
be
actually become more tired.
Bored.
What else?
Bored.
Bored.
Lethargic.
Yeah, lethargic. Yeah. What happens to your body if you sit in that chair for 15 months during a pandemic? Your body might not be in the same tone that it has been. So those are some of the possibilities. A dulled mind, you're out of shape, it's boring, you just aren't stimulated. And so when that happens, we often in our lives will then seek to get active and get up and do something. So what are some of the benefits of moving around, of activity?
My physical therapist says motion is lotion.
Okay. Yeah. Helps your body move better.
It's a natural antidepressant.
Yeah. 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 So some of the ones that I thought of were it keeps our mind sharper, keeps our body toned. We feel energized, stimulated, and challenged. And we need that in our life. And then we keep doing that and keep doing that, and we forget to rest and we go back down. And this is actually an infinite loop. Rest and activity are interdependent, like exhaling and inhaling, and yet they're in tension. To have a healthy life, it's not an either or, it's a both and managing how we move from one to the other. So just to give a little background here, the original book that came out that identified and really put together this schematic that I'm using is Polarity Management by Barry Johnson. And I love his subtitle, Identifying and Managing Unsolvable Problems. I'm also drawing from a second book. Barry Johnson wrote this one with Roy Oswald, who is a longtime and very experienced congregational consultant. And they looked at how these polarities work in congregations. These two books can be very useful if you're trying to figure out a polarity in your society. Although I think in ethical societies, we have to do a lot of translating. The first one has a lot of business language. The second one has some religious language that may not be ours. So I hope that I have translated all of it into ethical culture successfully. So what is a polarity? Sometimes when we're looking at issues in our society, in small groups, or in the whole society, there are issues where we have to take one or the other path. And you take one and you're set. Yeah, there may be lasting feelings because some people would have preferred you took the other path, but taking path A resolves the problem, and path A is no longer really relevant. So for instance, you're going to start your meeting on Sundays at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., and that's a choice. You might buy wooden or metal chairs for the society. Well, polarities are not like that. Polarities are interdependent pairs. In a polarity, you choose A, like inhaling or activity. And when you do more and more of A, it creates a need for doing B instead. And doing B, if we overfocus on that, it creates a need for A. You know, buying wooden chairs does not create a need for metal chairs. That's a choice. So let's look at some typical polarities that happen in small groups. And that might be something like a board or committee or your book group or a class that you're running. Every group has a task which is supposed to do. And that is always one of the things you're paying attention to. But a group also, because it's made up of people, has to deal with relationships. Are people included, listened to, and respected? And those two can be in tension. I'm sure you've all seen that in some groups. Related to that, are you going to make decisions efficiently and maybe quickly? Or do you want to take time to include many in that decision? Do you see how those are interdependent? You know, if we take too much time to be totally inclusive, it can take a long time. And sometimes the task can become an emergency and we have to make a quick decision anyway. And we can make too many decisions quickly and without consultation. And then we find ourselves with a rebellion in the group, with people demanding to be included. Okay, within any group trying to do a task, we want to be supportive of the people doing it, accepting people as they are. And we also want to challenge people to be more than they are now and to be the best that they can be. And I hope you can see where overdoing one of them can create the need for the other. Management and vision. You know, a board might delegate certain responsibilities to a committee, and the committee might manage those well, but then it might figure out better ways it could be doing it. And the committee's revisioning might actually begin to get in the way of getting the work done. So, and then there's one more, which is excellence and participation. Say you have a chorus at your society. Do you want an excellent chorus where the music is beautiful and everybody loves it? Or do you want to value participation so that anybody can join, even if they're always a half note different than the rest of the people? So none of these are problems that we can solve once and forever because they will always be with us. There is no right and wrong choice in either of these. Every group needs them both, and they are in tension. And by the way, I will have a handout that I can have Bart send out tomorrow with most of the highlights in it. So you don't have to worry about taking too many notes. So polarities or problems. If you treat a polarity as if it's an either or problem, that we have to do one or the other, then it's almost inevitable that we create power struggles. And persistent power struggles end up with persistent conflict. And often that means that neither perspective wins, that they both end up losing because they're fighting more than getting done what will move them to their purpose. So polarities are interdependent pairs of truth or doing the right thing. They supplement our either or thinking with both and thinking because there are times either or works. Polarities are natural and an integral part of life. And it helps to see polarities not as a problem, but as an opportunity or a gift to draw on more ideas and a better plan to get where you want to go. So polarities can be like inhaling and exhaling, rest and activity. Another one is stability and change. So the principles of polarity management, if you're working with an issue in your society, knowing the principles together can help provide a common understanding. And Barry Johnson and others who have developed this also try to do it in a way that draws on our natural and common experience and wisdom. It does use a sort of odd looking standardized map and diagram, and it has some standardized terms, and you've heard me use some of them already. And that's so that when you're looking at an issue together, you can use common language and then allow you to focus your real energy more on managing the polarity. So here's another image of what a polarity map may look like. I want to give you several examples to see that they are all basically the same. And I really am sorry for those on the phone who cannot see this. I'm hoping my descriptions give you at least some sense. So this is the center of a polarity map and what we would use to describe a polarity. In that center, you have pole A and pole B, which are the two sides of the polarity. Up at the top of the map, above the two green squares, you can see it says greater purpose. There's always a greater purpose that the two halves of the polarity are both trying to achieve. And we have the two green upper right and left quadrants are where we are going to document what we see as positive outcomes of each of the poles. And then we ask, what is the deeper fear that both poles are trying to avoid? And we put that at the bottom of the map. It helps to make it explicit what you're trying to not have. And the wonderful thing about polarities is in a real polarity, that's the same for both sides. For an ethical society polarity, for instance, a greater purpose might be to have a thriving ethical society, and a deeper fear might be that you have a dwindling and maybe pathetic ethical society. And we don't want that. The two right and left lower quadrants, which are different colors orange here, are for detailing the downsides of the two poles. What we think would take us closer to that deeper fear if these are out of balance. And you see the white dotted line, I hope, in that crosses between the quadrants. And you saw me do this with the examples we had. It's how we describe the natural movement in how people respond in polarities. If we're experiencing downsides of one pole, the natural tendency is to seek the positives of the other pole. And then when we have the positives of that pole and it gets out of balance, it moves to the downsides of that pole. And so then that naturally moves to the upside of the other pole. And when that gets out of balance and there's more than we can tolerate of that, then we start experiencing the downsides of that side. So it ends up that wonderful infinity loop. And that's partly why Johnson calls these are unsolvable problems. You never completely resolve which to do, you only manage it. I'll also add that at any moment, individuals tend to see these upsides and downsides from their own point of view. So for instance, if pole A is inclusive decision-making and pole B is efficient decision-making, one point of view tends to see the positives of inclusive decision-making and the negatives of efficient decision-making. And another point of view would be those people who see the positives of efficient decision-making and the downsides of inclusive decision-making. So that's what we call a point of view in polarities. I also want you to look at this more simplified version. You see the spiraling lines that are going upwards to an arrow, and there's also spiraling lines going downward to an arrow. If you stay stuck in the negatives of both sides, Maybe because you're in conflict and just it becomes this power game of trying to figure out which one you're going to do and cut the other one out. People lose their tolerance for doing that, and it's a downward spin, and that's what that spin down there represents, and that's called a vicious cycle. Or if you are able to manage the polarity and stay in the upsides as long as possible, you create more of an upward cycle toward the greater purpose. And in polarity management, we call that the virtuous cycle. The objective is to draw on the upsides of both sides of the polarity as much as we can, given that they are in tension, and so we do tend to move from one to the other. So I also want you to notice one other thing about this diagram of a well-managed polarity. You notice that infinity loop you saw before, this one is actually sort of non-symmetrical in the up-down dimension. Because you want to stay in the upsides as long as you can and get as high as you can in the upsides. And as soon as you detect early warnings that you've moved to a downside, then you want to take action steps to get to the other side of the pole. So that's why in this diagram of a healthy management of polarities, the bottom when you're spending time in the downsides is shallow. Okay. And so to do that, you need early warnings of when you get to the downside and action steps to get out of it. So this is actually the map as Barry Johnson originated it. That will be in your handout to look at and to play with if you'd like to. So we're going to actually go through a whole polarity together tonight. The first part of the process is to identify a polarity and to find neutral words. So I'm actually going to put Bart on the spot here and ask him to suggest a polarity that we could use to do this exercise.
So one that I hear a lot when I visit ethical societies, including my own, is the polarity of continuity and change in platform meetings.
Okay, so I'm going to describe that polarity in neutral language as change the format and keep the format. Okay, notice I'm using very neutral language. I'm not saying one side is make a bunch of wild changes and the other one is stay stuck in the mud, even though some people may be thinking that. So pole A for our exercise is going to be change the format, and pole B will be keep the format. And so I want everyone here to imagine that you are in the middle of a conflict about this in your society. If we do this the right way, whatever you think is the right way, what is the greater purpose? What is the shared greater purpose?
Increase attendance.
Okay, and why do you want to increase attendance?
May increase membership.
Say that again. Oh dear.
To increase your membership.
My earphones are giving me a little bit of a problem, so speak really slow.
Okay, to increase your membership.
Okay, and why do you want to increase your membership?
Because you can function more efficiently and with a better program at a slightly larger.
And why do you want that?
Effective in meeting the goals of the more, to the extent that we have something precious to offer, we want to offer it to more people.
Okay, so if you do this well, you'll have something precious that more people will be able to use. What is your deepest fear if you screw this up and you do it the wrong way?
You'll lose people who are members now and you won't gain any members.
And the consequence of that is?
You go the other way. You shrink into oblivion.
Yeah, let's find a word or a phrase for that deeper fear.
Deeper fear.
Anybody else?
That your society is no more, essentially. It can't function if it has very
Okay.
few members.
Yeah, maybe your society won't be able to function. Yeah, yeah. I tend to think most of the time our greater purpose is a thriving ethical society accomplishing what it wants to, what it's designed to accomplish. And a deeper fear is a society that's unable to function or no longer exists. So I wish for the next part of this, we had a whiteboard and we were all in the same room, or maybe a wall to put posters on so we could brainstorm together, but we don't. So we're going to try using a virtual whiteboard. Bart is going to put a link in the chat so that those of you who are on devices where you can look at a website can look directly at the whiteboard that we're using. And those of you who can't figure out how to do that or aren't able to do it because of your device or the capacity of your device, Bart's going to share his screen so you can follow on. And when I ask people to be able to brainstorm on the whiteboard, those of you who can't get to the whiteboard can express your ideas verbally, and we'll try and get most of those down there. So let's start. And I see people are arriving. Great. So okay, so I'm showing you the overview of what the polarity map looks like. And I'm just giving you a little bit of time to see how many get there. We got 14 there now. Okay, and in the center is the part that I've talked about so far, is we've already got there, changed the format, and keep the format. And we've got the greater purpose and the deeper fear down at the bottom. So what is the polarity again? It's changing the format and keeping the format. We're going to try and do this as a both and. How do we do them both? And our greater purpose is the thriving ethical society if we keep them in the right balance. And our deeper fear is maybe a dying ethical society or a bad member experience, which tends to create a dying ethical society. Okay, so let's start here. And we already put one on here. What is it like if we are over-focused on keeping the format exactly the same week over week, year over year? And let me release you so you can, those of you who've done this before will know you can either right-click on an empty clip and say duplicate to get another one there, or you can double-click and get your own Post-it note. And so what is the experience you have when there is over focus on keeping the platform format exactly the same? What is the experience like?
You watch a dying society. That's what happens.
Okay, we've got people are bored, reduced attendance, lose ability to keep younger people who want change. Format can deteriorate. It started good, but now it's stale, not exciting, not attractive to people who like a different style. Yeah, lots of negatives if it's always the same. So I'm going to move then to what happens when we start experiencing this in our ethical societies, and we have a lot of this happening. And by the way, somebody's got provides comfort. We're trying to come up with the negatives of doing this too much right now. Okay, loss of intellectual and something just went away.
Can I
And-
give you a verbal?
Okay, yep.
Repetition.
Yeah, it's repetitive, which to me would be very boring. We've got attending feels like a chore. Okay, so let's stop there for a minute. And the response we naturally have when we're experiencing our platforms is boring, new people aren't coming back, or they walk out in the middle. That's another one, by the way, is people start walking out in the middle. Is that we want to move to the values of the other pole. What are some of the values of having a platform format that has changed? What is that experience like?
They're awake.
Variety.
Yeah, but how do you experience that variety? What is the experience like when there's variety?
It's stimulating if it's variety and it's not.
Okay, so
Being
stimulating. I see energizing, intellectually and emotionally stimulating. Each meeting will feel fresher and more interesting. Learning new things. Okay, are there any others that people want to add? What's that experience like when you're getting a new format and it's different than it's been before? You discover opportunities. Yeah, those are the upsides. Eager to see what's next. Yeah, I once belonged to a congregation where kind of our main rule on Sunday is it could never look the same from week to week. And so I do want to say that, and we'll move from there, that when that happens, it can be very disconcerting to people. It can feel chaotic. So what are some of the things about being in that lower quadrant under change the format? What is it like when there's more change than you can tolerate in the format? What's that experience like? Or what do you fear happening?
Confusion.
Confusion?
You don't want to invite a visitor to something that may be a bad platform.
Yeah, you don't know if it's going to be any good. If you're experimenting, wow, yeah. It's also hard to explain to them what they're going to get into. Hard to invite somebody to something where, you have no idea what's going to happen that day. So maybe some frustration, maybe some disaffection because there's a beloved piece that's missing. Yeah. It might seem slapdash, Another one you might think about is it gets hard to get some expertise in doing it if it's always new. Okay, so if we're in that state where things are feeling chaotic, there's disaffection of people, the next thing that's going to happen, and I will take you with me here, is we move to trying to figure out how to have some stability. So what is the positive experience of having stability? What is that like? It's predictable.
It's comfortable.
Comfortable, yeah.
You know what you're inviting to someone to.
You know what somebody, you can even tell them ahead of time and be pretty predictive. Yeah. when
It
this
runs
argument
smoother.
yeah, pardon? It goes smoother, yeah, because you know how to do it. Yeah, and part of what people may be saying is if it works, why change it? It's comfortable the way it is. One of the things I often hear when this kind of polarity is active is, I joined because we did this. You're leaving me behind. So, you know, the positive part of that is, this is what I came here for. You know, I came here on a Sunday and you were lighting this beautiful candle that looked like a picture of the universe. And I just was so happy to have that kind of a candle for a change. And now you're getting rid of it, which would be the downside of change. Okay, so we've got some things here about, yeah, and ritual. Ritual itself has a power for the human being. That there is a part of our brain that likes the similarity over and over. Okay, so now if we have taken control and we've got the platform exactly the way it's been for the last 15 years again, and now we start to experience the negatives again. And so it is an infinite loop that will always be happening in our ethical society. You know, we find the downsides of one side, one pole, we move to the upsides of the other, that becomes overwhelming, and we move to the downsides, and then we move to the upside of the other pole. And then that one becomes disconcerting. It's also tough in a community because some people have more tolerance for the downsides and more joy in the upsides than others do. So there can be differences of how people experience, how strongly they experience the downsides. Okay, so the next thing we want to do with an actual polarity management is, and here I'm going to look at the whole chart again, is we want to look at early warnings. So let's start here. And early warnings that we have moved into the downside of stability. How would we know? We've talked about what the experience is like, but what are some of the observable indicators that we could actually measure that see if we're getting into that? And so let's move into that section and say, what are some of the early warnings that we've got more stability than is working? Okay, and what I want you to do is think about not the abstract, but how would you look at it and agree that this was true? So performance becomes rote. What does that mean that there's no freshness? How would you know that?
Some people who you expect to come aren't coming anymore. They say they've got other things that have been important.
Yeah, more people finding other things to do that morning, which may be a good sign that, and so, you know, if you keep track of attendance so you know how many numbers you have, you can track and say, oh, you know, we are losing some people. You might even be able to identify which subgroups of the society are not there. Reduced attendance, people are fidgeting in their seats. Yeah, and you want to think about how can you make that measurable. Some people fidget all the time, but more people than usual are fidgeting in their seats, or there's an increasing number. Let's see. Yeah, maybe the same platform topics you see repeating. Another clear early warning always is you start getting emails. if you're the organizer of platform. Say, couldn't we do something new? You know, and so one of the early warnings could be requests for change. Okay, so we kind of see how that works. Now think about these early warnings. Looking at cell phones, people spend the whole platform looking at their cell phone. Oh, another one is people are getting up in the middle of platform and lots more people are going out and making coffee than ever did that before. If we were in the situation where this was happening and we started to see these negative things happening, we want to then define what are the action steps we need to introduce change to both offset those negatives that have created those early warnings and to take advantage of the upsides of change. So by an action step, I mean something you can do concretely. So maybe share verbally one or two things that you think you could do concretely to increase the upside of change.
Maybe regularly survey membership to find out how they feel about platforms, or if they would like to try something different.
Okay, so you might do a survey to see what new things people want to do. What other things could you do for the upside of change?
Introduce variations in the quantity of the type of music, a variety of platform topics, some panel discussions.
Okay. And in brainstorm mode, I would put those as 3 separate ideas for action steps. You know, one might be to vary the music and see if that works. Another might be figure out some platform topics that you've never done before.
You could introduce it by pointing out what the continuities are. This is our
Okay,
usual X, but we're going to change it a little bit by introducing Y.
Lynn, you're getting way ahead because that's actually a different piece. And that's about how do we get stability. Right now, we're talking about what are the steps we need in order to get change. What do we need in order to have change?
You could experiment.
So do experiments, yeah.
Shift the order of.
Change the order, yeah.
One thing that we have going back and forth is every so often people will say, there are too many ethical society leaders speaking. And then we change it and have a couple of years later, they say, you know, we're not seeing enough ethical society people speaking. And we go back and forth in a cycle of, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. There's a demand both ways. And there seems to be no magic number, but both ways.
You know, one of the things we didn't talk about with, you know, the upsides and downsides was, you know, if you have a stable platform and you are getting more members or a lot fewer members, sometimes the same things that you were doing no longer work. So a classic example of that is those of us who do joys and concerns, where people spend a lot of time on that. If you were 300 members, that would be 3 hours. I actually did a guest speaking engagement at a Unitarian congregation on Zoom, and they had a half-hour joys and concerns for 15 people. And it was obviously very important to them. But if they doubled in membership, that would be really hard to manage. So one of the downsides of stability is that you can't stay stable when other factors are changing. So an action step in that might be, try and figure out a different way to do joys and concerns. So you might experiment with some different ways if it's, taking more and more time in the platform. So yeah, I think I opened it up now. So if you want to add some brainstorming steps into there of, positive ways that concrete things you could do. And when you're doing this in an actual situation, you want to do this as a brainstorm first. You're not judging each other's ideas other than, do they belong in this quadrant? And just get all the ideas you can out there for each of these action steps.
And I think if you right click, it will give you the option of adding a sticky note.
Yep. Yeah, right click and you can add your sticky note. So yeah, so what do we want to do to add some change into our platforms? And you could write down here some of the things you'd love to do in your own platform right now. What do you think would be a good change that would help address either the positive side of change and the advantages that you have when you do change, or that would offset some of the negatives of things having gotten a bit stale? Or no longer relevant. Yeah, Denise?
Make incremental changes, make small changes.
Yeah, okay. And that too, one of the things we might want to think about is, you're already thinking of how do we make it tolerable to the stability people. So hold that idea for when we get to how to keep some stability in there. Yeah, so bring in speakers. How about having a whole platform that was dance? We're in brainstorm mode. Let's have a whole platform that's dance. What are some of the other crazy ideas you have? Come on, you just say them or put them up there.
Quaker style.
Don't worry about if people are going to like it or not. You want it.
Something that we have done that was very interesting, was just completely unexpected, was playing games of that you would play if you were at, at a camp or something, to try to learn a little bit more about people. And
yeah,
I don't know what you call them, but anyway, we did a whole day of that.
Yeah, so if your standard is, we have a few things and then we have a speaker and we have some music in between and then we have some questions and then we end, playing games for the whole platform would be a big change. And remember that some people will experience that as too much. So that's the next piece that we want to look at. Now we've talked about some of the things we could do in brainstorm mode to introduce change. So I'm going to drag us around here. And what are the early warnings that we might see that we have gone too far here? What are some of the concrete warnings that our change is not working?
People coming late.
Some people may say, I miss that other thing we used to do.
Okay.
Yeah, so anger, people leave in the middle, negative feedback. Once again, how many emails am I getting? And how personally are they attacking me?
People not inviting
Side
their
conversations.
people not inviting their friends.
People might not invite their friends, right? But how would you notice that? Just, that, again, try to be concrete here. A smaller number of visitors that are brought by friends is how we might word that. And how would we know about anger?
Sometimes
What would
they
be
let
observable?
You know.
Say that again?
You hear that anger at the coffee hour afterwards.
Okay, so there's a different tone in the coffee hour. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
but-
maybe even somebody screaming. We
Yeah,
hope
but
that wouldn't
also
happen in an
just
ethical
the
society,
content.
but
Just a
okay. And
content.
again, yeah. And again, you might keep track of attendance. This could also cause attendance to fall. We don't actually know when attendance falls, which side it is the intolerance on. And do notice that some of them might be the same early warning on either side. And then you might have to move to Condra's survey to see, okay, what's going on here? Okay, so then the next thing we do, which you might have figured out by now, is we want to figure out what are the action steps we take when this happens. Oh, I just saw factions develop. So we want to have action steps as well that we first brainstorm and later pick from in an actual plan. And the action steps here are concrete things we can do that a person can be responsible for, who can do it by when, that will increase the upsides of stability and counter the downsides of change. And here, Lynn, is where I would put yours. So do you want to say it again, the one that you had?
Point out to people that there's an element of continuity in the change.
Yeah, so maybe make sure that there is continuity in the change when you plan a change, and remind people of what is happening that is the way it's happened before.
Also emphasize the continuity of purpose.
Right. And I would, by the way, put the explain changes and reasons for change on the other side of action steps to make change effective. How do we make stability effective? How do we make change effective here? And yeah, we might bring something back. I've had that happen where, you know, I came in as a new leader, and one of the first things people said was, we have really missed this piece of our platform. The last leader didn't do it, and we'd really like to have that back. And I usually find that when it's back for about a year, then people are ready to give it up. Yeah, so invite people to offer what they want to hear, emphasize continuity of purpose, have some elements that don't change. You know, think about not changing everything at once.
Yeah.
You know, have something in it that works. So one of my examples for that was in this congregation I once belonged to, which did something different every week. One Sunday, they decided to do the whole thing as a practical joke. And so every element got converted into jokes. And so, for instance, they had their social action moment, and somebody got up and talked about how it was unfair that blind people couldn't get driver's licenses. The problem with that Sunday was there were two different people who had come because they'd had a tragedy in their life, and they really wanted comfort that Sunday. And the whole thing was a joke. And it didn't work. And if there had been just 2 or 3 things in there that were stable, that Sunday would have worked so much better for them. Okay, so when you're doing this in your society, you want to be very concrete with this. You might say, let's keep the words that we use when we light the candles. Let's continue to say, the place where we meet to seek the highest is holy ground. You know, I imagine 25 years ago when people were changing that from the original words of where men meet, that was disturbing to some people to change sacred words, and that there had to be some other compensating stability that people were okay with. Okay, so the action steps for that poll, you're going to be for the action steps in brainstorm mode. And then later in a real exercise with your society, you would decide on maybe 2 to 5 action steps that you want to have in a plan. So let's go back to the overview, and I think I have to make you come with me again. So if we look at this whole plan, if you were doing this and moving beyond brainstorm mode, you would actually write a plan that listed 2 or 3 early warning signs for each side. And then you would write your action steps that either you're going to take now or you would have ready if the warning signs are activated. And they would be concrete so that they could just, be there when you needed them. And that's how polarity management turns from thinking about the problem or the issue that you've got and describing it into an actual action plan. Again, the point is to stay in the upsides as long as possible and to get as high in them as possible. And to, when you do notice the warning signs, because you will move into the downsides, it's part of the natural cycle, that you get out of the downside very quickly, before half your congregation has quit, for instance. Okay. Are there questions about this map? And I'll take about 3 or 4 minutes if anybody has some questions about how you would do this.
Should I stop share?
Let's keep it on sharing in case that's helpful for a question.
Got it.
Anybody have questions or comments about how you could see this being of use?
I'll raise the hand.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
It's not so much how to use it. I think it's an excellent thought experiment. I like it, and I will try to use it. But my question really comes, and maybe I should have said this from the beginning. I'm not sure I really understand polarity in the sense that in the way that you described it earlier. I don't see these two things being interdependent. It's not,
okay.
You don't have to ever change anything, right? You could keep things the same forever, or you could change as your place did every week.
Yeah.
You don't
can your ethical society keep exactly the platform format forever?
Sure.
Is that actually possible?
Sure, it's possible. In my mind, it's possible that you might end up with a crew of 30 people that never changes. But
right, and what you have then is you're getting the downsides but ignoring them, and so that's why it's an interdependency, because you will the prediction is that if you stick with one side or the other without paying attention to where the downsides are, that you will move in that vicious cycle down to a dying ethical society. And I think we could actually maintain that some of the societies which have died have been ones that did not change when they needed to, or tried more change than was tolerable at the time. And that itself created problems.
Okay, I see that.
Plus, there are other changes that come from the outside. When your membership grows or shrinks, the same format may not end up with the same product. Okay, Carolyn.
Different styles may, there are different generations who will like classical music or will like folk or will like rock. And as the generation taste changes, if you don't vary with the generations, then you're going to get it into an old age home.
Yeah, I remember feeling at one platform, I was just so happy to hear an old favorite of mine, Bill Staine's River, being played by the musicians. And I went to talk to a friend at the society who was a millennial. And before I could say, oh, how happy I was, she said, oh, I had to leave when that music came on. It was like being in an old folks home. And so it was a reminder to me that even though I loved it, it didn't necessarily work for everyone. Carolyn.
I would, back to your original question, I hope, in looking at this, I've seen you talk about this before, but it's more understandable now. And I like to see how all the pieces go. What I'm thinking, however, is in a small society, which doesn't have, I wouldn't say that a clergy leader is necessary, but some sort of leadership that would help guide through this process. It's a little complicated to make sure you've got all the concepts. And I think it takes time. It sounds to me like it's take sustained effort. And what I worry about is whether or not there would be the ability in a small society to stick with it for the weeks of discussion.
It wouldn't necessarily be weeks. I mean, I've been through this with actual societies. And actually that center part goes very quickly. I didn't mention it before, but one of the things that really works well, especially if you've begun to move toward having camps that are for one point of view or the other, is when you do that brainstorming of all of them, people end up offering things in empathy for the people they disagree with. Okay. And it builds an understanding. The planning may take a little longer, but sometimes it may be just, let's watch these two things and we'll do this month and then we'll look at it again. But Bart, we were going to talk about this a little later, but why don't you for now say something about what a society can do if it wants to do this, but doesn't feel comfortable doing it on their own.
Right. Yeah, because that is one of the things, it's all kinds of great ideas out there, but to find those ideas that you can actually put into play is the trickier part. So we now have a section on AEU resources, which can I stop sharing this now or should I?
Yeah, you can stop sharing now.
Let me stop sharing that. And then I can share the other piece. Where'd it go? Okay. So this is the AEU's own private website, basically called AEU Resources. And you can see on here, there is a training section and there's a lay leadership skills training section. And on here, so this has the skills training that we already have made arrangements for. So there's a whole bunch of them here. And there's a button so you can request a workshop. And so when you do that, it opens up a form and you can go ahead and request it. So what that does is alert us that your society is interested in having one of these workshops. And then we will see to it that we find a facilitator, if that's the way you want to go, to help with that. So sometimes people just want the resources. We can send the resources. Other times people would like to have a facilitator. We can provide the facilitator. We're also, by the way, recruiting and training more facilitators. So that's the other thing. If you happen to be someone, for instance, who would enjoy facilitating, I do hope that you'll get in contact with me and we can talk about how to make that a reality. As it is right now, because we can do so many things with the Zoom system, it is possible to do consultations without having to actually physically travel to other places. So anyway, just to say. Joan, you got muted somehow.
Remember that polarities are always really about that greater purpose or the deeper fear. In a true polarity, both poles will be trying to work for that common purpose, even though they seem to be working at odds sometimes. And both of them, if you can't figure out how to manage them, and if they don't work out, might lead to the deeper fear. So, in ethical societies, it tends to be things like a thriving ethical society, having satisfied or dissatisfied members, a growing membership or people leaving, effective social action or ineffective social action, enhanced relationships or poor relationships. So I do want to talk about the steps, and you will find this in the handout that will be sent out tomorrow. And we went through this with my guidance, but I want to just clarify the 5 steps here. The first is to identify the polarity and reword it into neutral language. And it sometimes is harder to do it in neutral language, especially if emotions have gotten high about arguing what we're going to do. And then the next piece is to name that greater purpose and deeper fear. When you can name that both of those have the same, both polarities have the same goal and the same thing they're trying to avoid, it can help. Then the third step is to describe that polarity. And what I mean there is do that 4-quadrant piece with the upsides and downsides. Do it in the order of the infinity loop, because that will feel more natural as you go through. Because you'll describe a problem and then you'll solve it. And then you'll look at the solutions and say, what could go wrong there? And then when you get all the, what could go wrong, you solve it. And note the points of view, which are the people who are for one pole's upside and against the other pole's downside. Because that will help you see, oh, that's where I am on here, and my tendency is to see it this way, and your tendency is to see it this way, which builds understanding and the ability to work together. And then identify observable and measurable early warnings. One of the great reasons for keeping track of your attendance is, that's often an early warning of many things. If attendance goes down, or a sign that things are going well is attendance going up. And then identify the action steps. What is specific, doable, achievable, relevant? Try not to be vague here. Don't say, let's get better speakers. What you want to say is, let's get, in the next 6 months, 5 speakers who are, from the field of science or philosophy. So be specific. And remember to do early warning and action steps for both sides. So some common polarities that you will see, I covered a few earlier, but maybe now it'll be clearer what they are. In the Oswald and Johnson book, they identified 8 congregational polarities that in their consulting work with congregations across different religious lines, and ethical societies are no different because we're all people. There are certain polarities which tend to come up over and over. The first one is stability or change, and we did kind of a version of that. You might think of it as tradition and innovation, honoring the past and staying relevant, what's worked and is working, and what we need for a new future. Another one I would name inspirational health and institutional health. Sometimes, especially in a struggling society, you get really focused on, is the board functioning? Is it having its meetings? Do we have enough people on the board? Are we getting our pledges done? And we forget to inspire people. And sometimes we get so focused on inspiring people that the institution of the society is neglected. And so both want to have a healthy society. Another way this might play out, you might call it philosophical rigor and organizational vibrancy. Another one that's very common is management and leadership. You need both the practical side of making things operate day to day and the visionary side of how do we do things in a way that's maybe more effective, more efficient, or even different. This is one that many of our societies have as a polarity: strong clergy leadership and strong lay leadership. Our strongest societies are ones in which professional clergy leaders and lay leaders are both strong and work in partnership. It's not an either or. In-reach and outreach. Do we want to meet members' needs, or do we want to reach out to the wider community? Do we want to meet the needs of our long-term members, or do we want to focus on meeting the needs of new members? And I think you can see in all of those, over focus on one can create more problems, and yet you need them both for a vibrant, successful ethical society. Another one is nurture and transformation. You want to nurture the people who are in your society or who come visit, and you want to help them transform. Another way to say that is the old saying, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Another one is, what do you think it means to become an ethical person? Is that an easy process or a challenging process? This might also play out in membership. Is it easy to become a member of your society, or is it challenging? There is some research in congregational life that says that making it a bit more challenging to become a member makes it more likely that people stay members and can build a more thriving society. It sounds counterintuitive. And finally, follow your heart and do your duty. I don't want to be on the board this year. I just, I've got too many things in my life. And if everybody says that, you don't have a functioning institution. And yet, if everybody is doing their duty and not getting out of their life what they want, you also will have a society that doesn't work. Okay, and in small groups, I'll repeat some of those. We have the content or task versus and process and relationship. The efficient decisions and inclusive decisions. How do you make them decisions efficient and have inclusive decisions? How do you support and challenge people within a group? Management and vision, and excellence and participation. And I talked about those before. And I'm going to skip over this one. In the fuller workshop, we would go through that. Oops, that's not where I wanted to be. So those polarities that I have talked about are going to be in the list of them, and some of the translations are in the handout. A guy named William Bennett, did some work on polarities and looked at the polarities of democracy, and a way to look at using the concept of polarities to think about how do we stay a democratic society? How do we get social change? We want both freedom and there's a need for some authority. We want both justice and due process. We want both participation and representation to make things work. We want both human rights, individual rights, and communal obligations. I was really pleasantly surprised to find out in the context of our overall topic for this week. One of the resources I will put into the chat, into the list of resources, are two videos that Barry Johnson did fairly recently about how he sees polarities applying. In the second one, which is described as part 3 and 4, he has asked, how do you apply this in the social realm? And so this is his perspective, is that racism, poverty, and sexism are symptoms of systemic institutional policies and practices. And I think most of us agree with that. He also goes further and says, maybe those systemic policies and practices are themselves not the root cause, but are symptoms. And that those are created because people are rooted in values that have some polarities that aren't being managed well if those policies and practices are not working well. So for instance, we have a desire to solve problems. That's a natural human desire. But if we're overbalanced in our society to either or thinking and we don't do both and thinking, we may think that, we either have to work on poverty or we have to be able to fight a war. And we might not think of both. How could we be self-protective and end poverty? We do want to protect ourselves. And he looks at this polarity as claiming power and sharing power as a polarity. Everybody, part of becoming an individual and is claiming some power for ourselves. And if we focus as a society on claiming power individually without having room for sharing power, we create an undemocratic society, which is unfair to many people. A desire to provide for ourselves. And Barry suggests that there's a polarity here of abundance, which, in society becomes for some. And what about if we really wanted the basics for everyone? Is that really an either or is it a both and? And he talks about the desire to belong. And here, the polarity becomes, I want my good stuff for my group, and I want good stuff for other groups. And if we're out of balance and society has many people with power who are claiming power and who are only focused on their group, we create policies and practices which then create racism, sexism, and poverty, for example. He talks about accountability and love. I would say, we want a society in which there are ways that we are accountable for the harm that we do, and we are each still loved or valued for who we are as a person. So one of the things that Barry Johnson says about this, and he talks about, he's a white man, and there is this racism and sexism in society. So maybe there's a polarity of accepting that society's been good for him and enjoying some of that, and at the same time acknowledging that he benefits from an abuse of power and the marginalization of others. And so it's possible to both be proud of your own achievements and success and understand that you've done harm. I think this fits really well into some of where some of us have been going around. White supremacy is not a matter of guilt and shame. It's a matter of responsibility and accountability in the harm that we have also done, and we've been good people in other ways. So it's another application of polarities that I found was very interesting, fitting very much into the theme of the assembly. So not all problems are polarities. Some are choices that you make, and some issues that you have are polarities. Now, one of the ways you can guess that you're in a polarity is if you're stuck and you do it over and over and over and get into destructive conflict. And especially if it keeps coming back once you think it's solved. Sometimes there's another polarity that you haven't seen, and that's when help, like Bart described, can be really good. There's another polarity I want to suggest, which is solving problems ourselves and getting help. And what are some of the early warning signs if we're in conflict in a society, if we are stuck on solving it ourselves? So here are some of the early warning systems. When do you want to get outside help? When solid camps begin to form. When people are good people begin name calling and personal accusations. Rather than saying, oh, now they're a bad person, one of the things I've learned to realize is, oh, this means conflict is a really high level and we need some help. When good people tell different versions of the truth from each other's versions, and they're both honest people, but they really do see the the incident differently. Or when people begin to describe their viewpoint as ethical and the other as unethical, when it's actually a polarity and both are good ideas. So before I take final questions, I want to reiterate the books. There will be links to where to find those and read more about them in the handout. And the handout also includes some short articles that you can find on the internet. The links are alive as of today. And it does include a couple of videos if you want to get into it more deeply. It includes links to the books, and it will include, and the handout also includes the key points from tonight. So final question. Some of you have your hands up and I don't know if it's from before. How about Mimi?
This is from a while back, but I was struck by the fact that though you've been talking about a society or a group in the society doing this as a group, just that diagram, the way of thinking about these things and the diagram could be very helpful for an individual clarifying how you see the situation and how you might want to respond.
Yes. Yeah, I've done many of these on a napkin to just clarify it for myself. And there is actually another book, which I didn't include on the list, of using polarity management in coaching. So, which is really helping an individual get a perspective on and then some plans for when their life is out of balance on some polarities. So, Barbara.
There we go. Thank you, Joan. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was more an observation that occurs to me from the talk, Joan. Thank you. A couple of years ago, seasons ago, we made a choice. I wasn't told or asked or informed to put a big banner, Black Lives Matter, on the outside of our building.
Mm-hmm.
I personally had no issue, but I know because I heard a few people chewing Bart's ear about it, and I heard how they felt. I think about it now. I mean, it's really this is all about communication, it seems to me, and we never. I don't know why. It seems to me it could have been used as a really wonderful inspiration for a topic, for a platform, but we never spoke about it. And I wasn't on the board. I am just now joining it, but I don't know how they came to decide it. And I wonder if, again, we spoke about it, or if somehow it was such a hot topic that we backed away from that. And it might have, maybe it was just me, but I perceived that it could have been difficult for some people and not others, but it could have been a good inspirational topic.
Right, and a couple of different polarities can be involved here. You know, one being, making decisions efficiently and inclusively. There are plus sides to both. Another might be, are we going to be supportive of where everyone is currently, or are we going to challenge people? Another one might be management and vision. And so some of those might be involved in how something like that happens.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, it is a way to think about it. And it may be one of, there are many things where there is not one right way. It's just, how do we balance it so we minimize the downsides? Yeah, Stephen.
One of the things that you seem to skirt, in order to do these polarities, or in order to do any of the things that you talked about, requires commitment. it requires people to be committed to getting something done, even to getting programs done, or hanging banners, or whatever. And one of the things that I've noticed that we don't talk about in ethical culture is commitment. And I think it's important. I think it's partly, it entails, it is involved in membership. We let people in as members, and we don't really ask people to make commitments. And
Yeah,
I
so,
think,
so let me just say, Steve, that there are two pieces here in the typical congregational polarities, which, I mean, that same thing happens with other groups as well. This might be one of those of, is it easy to be a member, or is it a high commitment to be a member? Another one might be, follow your heart and do your duty, which might be, we want a bunch of free spirits here who can do whatever they want, and we need commitment. How do we get the upsides of both of those in our society and so what you're describing really is a system which is overcommitted to one of the poles, which is the freedom and the independence and the free spirit. And how do you move a society to the plus sides of commitment, understanding that for a lot of people, there are downsides to a sense of overemphasis on commitment. And I would really encourage you to kind of go through that exercise of what are the upsides and downsides of both sides of that.
I think, Joan, that there are levels of commitment. I think an organization can create different.
Right. And that is where you would get into your action steps if you did this as a polarity exercise of how do we create a society in which there is enough and a high level of freedom and a high level of commitment. How do we do that? I have seen lots of congregations that are able to manage that and have both be true. And it takes some management to make that happen. So I don't want to get into the specifics of how you do it, because that will be really unique for your society, and taking it on and figuring it out is part of it. And it may be that just that committed core is going to be the one that actually tries to figure it out.
So we need a commitment manager or a commitment committee.
Right.
Well, or, that might be one of your action steps.
Yep. And I do say, one of the things that could be really helpful is to have a third party basically coming in to kind of work with your group to kind of talk through some of these things. I think it can make a nice difference. So I do hope you'll consider that pathway forward. I'm taking a look at the time, and we have gone past our 9:30 ending time by a few minutes. So I'd like to, first of all, thank Joan for pulling all this together and providing us with a great workshop. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out today and remind you that we will be sending out the materials to everyone going forward. Tomorrow, hopefully we'll get that out there, and Anna will be making the recording available. So if you want to review what we have in there, you can go right back there to that as well.
Right.
Thank you,
Steve,
John.
I'm sorry to cut you short, but it was because I was aware of that we were at our ending time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Fine.
Indeed. And I think the conversation is bound to continue on a lot
Right.
of
And it's a good one to continue.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, you had to deal with some polarities here, Joan. Time versus material.
Yes, time versus quality.